Today, I'm chatting with longtime friend of mine, Alec Dahl. Like myself, Alec is a mechatronics systems engineer and an avid outdoorsman. In this episode, Alec and I talk over the basics of getting a YouTube channel up and running, understanding the fundamentals of advertising and the algorithm, and the importance of content consistency. I would love to hear your thoughts on Alec's perspective of posting cadence, so please leave a comment below and smash those buttons that help us grow. All right. Welcome back to another episode of Creative Conversations. Today I'm talking to Alec Dahl, a mechatronics engineer and YouTuber. Welcome to the show, Alex. Alec?
Hey.
Alec.
Alec, man, come on.
Yeah. Did I say Alex the first time too?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I'm so sorry. It is Alec Dahl, not Alex Dahl.
Yeah.
C, not an X, even
correct.
though his full name is Alexander. Right?
That's how it works.
I mean, that makes sense because there are a lot of Alexes. Like, there's an Alex in this house in the basement suite, which is, I think, undoubtedly why I often have Alex on my mind.
Yeah, he's the one messing you up.
Yeah. And especially, I definitely mix up your name sometimes. Well, not mix up your name, but like plural with your name because Alec, plural is Alex. And yeah.
That's correct.
Or possessive. Yeah.
Yeah, possessive. Yeah. So what's up?
So, I actually did not know you had a YouTube channel until the Halloween party. For the listeners, we had a Barbie-themed Halloween party this year, as I'm sure so many of others had also. Barbie was probably the number one sold costume theme this year. And at Alec's house, we had a very, very pink night with all of the lights and many of the walls and roof being pink as well. And that is when I found out that you had the channel. Amanda had mentioned that you were looking into YouTube at some point, but I don't think she had mentioned that you had actually had a channel going.
Well, it was back in the spring, so I like mountain biking a lot now. I've been doing it for several years, and I was getting inspired by some of the other mountain biking YouTubers that I've seen. And the idea seemed like something that wasn't too hard to start up and get into. Just needed a camera. Got one for my birthday back in the spring.
Easy.
And then that was kind of the start of it. So I was like, okay, let's do it. So once you start recording and then just posting stuff, then the whole learning cycle just starts flowing from there.
Yeah, we're learning about that right now as we go through the editing process of all of these.
Yeah, so that's a whole skill by itself, which you realize once you have all this raw footage and you want to put it on YouTube that you can't just put raw footage onto YouTube because you're not going to get very many views.
How did you start by posting raw footage before you realized that, or did you?
No, because when you watch YouTube, you notice immediately that everything is heavily processed. Depending on who you watch, some things are not as processed as others. A lot of the huge channels, you'll see a lot of heavy editing. You'll see like professional level editing, which I'm sure you're familiar with from the movie industry that you work in and the tools involved. But there are a lot of really good free tools right now. I use DaVinci Resolve, which touts itself as a movie industry editing software.
Is that, there's also an AI generative software called DaVinci. Is it the same company, or do they just use the same name because DaVinci was the artist to end all artists?
I'm not sure if they're related or not, so I can tell you.
Okay.
So DaVinci Resolve has like thousands of YouTube videos of tutorials, so you can learn pretty easily from that.
That is super handy.
And then you can basically start editing your videos. And it has all the basic stuff. Like at the beginning, you just want to start with like a quick workflow for making good cuts, and then splicing things together, doing basic audio stuff like filtering, EQ, and
stuff I'm very glad we have Ricardo for.
Probably like censoring out swear words as you screw up when you're mountain biking down a trail. Because there's some rules for profanities on YouTube that can affect how your video is pushed.
Can you talk about those a little bit?
How
much do you know?
There's something about the first amount of seconds in the video where if there's a profanity, it will categorize it differently. It'll categorize the video differently. So I don't know if it's like 10 seconds or 15 seconds. I forget what I read, but If there's a swear word in the video that is not part of music, because a lot of songs have swear words and you use music as background music sometimes for your video, then it'll categorize the video as like a whole different thing and basically can't be pushed to kids and things like that.
I don't know if I've ever seen a video that comes out of the gate in the first 10 seconds dropping F-bombs.
Yeah, I don't know either. You don't really see those probably because they don't get pushed as much.
All right, so no swearing in the first 10 to 15 seconds of our videos.
Yeah, just there's a whole bunch of random little rules and things like that. But obviously they're for good reason. And like, if you're doing something relatively normal, then you don't really have to worry about all the nitpicky things. It's just like you run into weird things sometimes when you do research. It's just fun facts about how YouTube works.
Inevitably, you find the edge cases too when you're doing research.
Yeah. So after editing becoming a whole skill, like that's not even just it, right? You have to manage the whole channel, and then creating thumbnails for your videos is essentially a whole skill in itself because that's the hook.
Yeah.
To get the click. And getting the views is the first step to...
Everyone wants to judge a book by its cover.
Yeah. Getting the views is the first step to even getting a retention score, right? You don't get a retention score if you don't get a view. So the thumbnail and designing
it's hard to get views if you don't have a retention score. The chicken and egg paradox.
I guess it's a little circular, yeah. Because YouTube will primarily consider audience retention as a metric for how good your video is.
So like how long someone has continued to watch the video?
Yeah, like what percentage of the video do they watch, right? If you have a 5-minute video and then the average retention is a minute, then they've watched 20% on average, and you can see the whole drop-off chart. And,
cool.
And seeing the whole back end is really neat, because if you're not a creator, you don't really see what the creators are seeing in terms of who's watching their videos and what's going on. But YouTube has a huge amount of metrics. And they present it all to you in a separate app like called YouTube Studio.
I've only ever seen the tools essentially empty because like we have the channels like kind of set up and ready to put the podcast on, but like we haven't posted anything, so we don't have any data.
Yeah, so you need to actually post some stuff to get some data. But then you'll start seeing it, and then you can get a little obsessive, but I wouldn't worry about it too much, right? Especially in the beginning when the volume of traffic that you get will naturally be low because you essentially need to build rapport. I think it's pretty rare that somebody starts a channel, posts one video, and then it goes viral.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever, like, every channel that I have gone to that I can remember or think of already has at least close to 24 videos, like, on the low end before I've found them. I don't think... Probably around 24 is the lowest number of videos I've seen on a channel that I have found randomly, like on the homepage or something.
Yeah. So the idea of hitting it big right off the bat on YouTube, I don't think that's very common. I don't even know if it's possible. But, you know, I mean, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's just improbable because YouTube connects the metrics, I think, from what I've seen, of all the individual videos on the channel to kind of build a score for the channel itself, and then the algorithm also links viewers' preferences to the channel being in the pool of the things that the viewers want to see. How deep into the algorithm did you dive for this? Not very, but you get a basic understanding of how. Well, okay, so YouTube is a media platform, right? And the goal of the media platform is to retain the viewers as well, right? Right. It kind of. You get to look at the motivations of the different agents at play when you consider media as a whole, right? You have the viewer, you have the distributor, and then you have creators. That's the triangle. The creators want to get views so that they get paid by the distributors. Right. The platform. The YouTube is the distributor. In order for them to make money, they need people to watch them. So YouTube needs to figure out how to put the right content in front of all the viewers so that the viewers spend as much time as possible watching YouTube. And that's what the goal of the algorithm is. Right. So you can figure out the motivations and understand what the algorithm is doing by that. So YouTube will prod with all the new content that's flooding onto it. They'll prod and try to figure out associations, like what is this video about? As a creator, you can try to help give them clues as to what the video is about with like the tagging, the naming, the descriptions, all of the other
Okay.
information and metadata that you put in the
Right.
whole video. And then the algorithm needs to put that in front of people and compare it against other similar content that they're also putting in front of the same people to get those people to watch YouTube for as long as possible so they can push as many ads to those people and make the most amount of money.
Yes.
Right?
And
That's how it works.
have you come across the 8 unskippable ads yet?
8?
Yeah,
No,
apparently in some regions they've been trialing 8 unskippable ads before starting a video.
I would just stop watching YouTube.
Right? Like, honestly, I don't know who would keep watching 8 unskippable ads, but that's worse than commercials between, like, during a commercial section of a TV show, you probably have about 8 ads.
Yeah, that sounds like, what is it, like the late 90s when you're trying to watch a movie on one of those movie channels on cable TV where you get like 4 minutes of ads, 30 seconds each.
Yeah.
You would go and make food during that time.
Yeah, and then that kind of thing is exactly why Netflix got as big as it did in the first place, because no one wants to sit through ads while they're trying to engage in their content.
Yeah. So obviously that's a fine balance to strike as the content distributor for
Even
that.
the content creators, like if we're putting ads into our videos and podcasts, like how many ads is too many ads? Like how long of an ads or it's like a sponsorship clip in the middle is like enough for people to listen to for you to get ad money, but not too much that it's going to say or that people are going to say like, I'm tired of listening to these ads.
Yeah, that's interesting because you can see in recent years there's a lot of different mechanisms to push advertisement content because now, as you mentioned, it's in the video directly.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a section, this video is sponsored by blah, 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 and they have a 30-second skit on it or whatever and give the rundown on what that product is. And then they go back to whatever the heck their content was, which is completely unrelated to what they were advertising.
Completely.
Like typical one is advertising for some kind of VPN software.
Yes. AG1 is also a very common and popular one. Athletic Greens.
Okay.
It's a supplement. It's got supposed to be like 7 servings of fruit and veggies, and then also like some protein and collagen and like probiotics or something.
Are you placing an ad in this podcast?
No, AG1 is not sponsoring us yet, but they will be.
Hopefully, maybe.
Hopefully, maybe. I would actually love. I think they're local because there's a factory in Richmond that was across the street from a location that I prepped for a show that I was working on. And have you ever heard of Organica? They're like a supplement brand. I think they're a local company. We get them from Costco. Like we have their collagen supplement. We have a competitor to AG1 that's basically fruit, veg, collagen, and probiotics. They also have spirulina, which is like an algae-based green thing you put in smoothies.
Okay.
So like maybe I'll get the local version of AG1.
Yeah, maybe you can get some deals, man. But like affecting retention with placed advertisements is a risk, and people have control to a certain degree. Creators have control over to a certain degree in how they put that in their content because you can put it in the video directly, but then there's also the content distributor controlling how much advertisement goes around the content as well, which I think creators have a certain degree of control in YouTube once you get monetized, which I am not yet. So
right, because you need 1,000 subscribers to get monetized.
I don't have any control over what ads get placed on my videos, and I don't make any money off the ads that get placed on my videos.
But there are still ads on your videos. I've kind of wondered that for people that aren't monetized. Do they? Because I feel like people that have less than 1,000 subscribers, I feel like I've seen less ads on their videos than people who have more. Although, to be fair, my data on that is completely skewed because I use an ad blocker, which we should maybe edit out so YouTube doesn't hear.
Yeah, so you don't actually know what's going on then. That's the thing. So all these new creators are trying to get in, and which there's a lot of competition to do so. That whole pool of non-monetized creation is purely at the benefit of the distributor, YouTube.
Right. So the podcast hosting platform that we're using is called Acast, and they have what they call dynamic ads, which essentially give you the power to choose if you want the ad at the start of your episode, the end of your episode, or inserted in the middle. And you can pick kind of like in the point, like where in the middle it gets dropped. And then it also, like, because it's a dynamically inserted ad, they insert it per play so that if someone watches the video or listens to it like 5 years in the future, they drop in like recent relevant ads for
Yeah, the ads aren't
engagement.
fixed. I think if you're designating a location in a video for an ad to appear, the ads are always targeted nowadays. Like,
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually.
you
I
never
hadn't
have non-targeted ads nowadays because it's absolutely futile, right? Like if you see
absolutely
some,
futile.
from a money making perspective, like it's a waste of ad space, right?
It
Because
is, yeah,
the way
very much
ads work
so.
is, like say the distributor of the media content to which they're attaching ads to, they only make money if the ads get clicked, essentially, right? Or used or noticed or interacted with. Like I think they might get a bit of money for pushing the ads anyways, but they probably are incentivized via the way the ad contracts work to get more money if the ads are actually working.
Yeah,
Right?
like paid by engagement on ad kind of
Yeah.
thing.
So if and that goes back to the point of the algorithm, right? The algorithm knows what people are interested in and then therefore try to push relevant ads that are more likely to be engaged with.
Do you watch a lot of mountain biking videos? Is that what got you onto this path? Or were you just thinking like, this is something that I do a lot that I love and this is like an easy thing for me to make videos of?
You definitely watch a lot of mountain biking videos when you get into mountain biking. I think that's just part of the hobby in itself because you want to know where to go, what trails are like, and what a cool riding spot might be. So
It's a good point, actually. That'd be a
you
great way
want
to
to
find trails.
scout things out, right? Because when you're starting off, you want to know, is that trail doable for me? Like, I've been doing it for maybe a month or two. Like, is that trail going to be too hard? Am I even going to have fun on it? And then even when you get later, more skilled, like say first year, second year kind of mountain biking level, then maybe you want to look at some harder trails. You still want to scout it out to see if it's going to be fun or not. So there's a whole bunch of videos, and they're all kind of linked to this app called Trail Forks, where you can look up the trail, and the trail has a tab for all the videos that are
Cool.
posted about it, and then you can watch all the videos. Now, the reason, or one of the reasons and motivations for me to make these videos is that the content on the Trail Forks app in these video lists are often just not good enough. So I see a bit of a gap in the market for just a straight up top to bottom run of a decent rider, clearing most, if not all, the features in a short amount of time. You don't want a bloated video. You just want to see in a quick and succinct way what this trail is about and how to go about it.
So how long are your videos?
Well, it depends on the length of the trail and how fast
guess,
I ride,
yeah,
which there's a huge variety of, right?
I guess the trails vary in length drastically.
Yeah, that's also another problem, right? You click on a video and it isn't mapped properly to the location for that trail. So it might be some edited cuts of the trail so you don't get the whole thing. Or it's a video of many different trails and now you're kind of searching through, I just wanted to see that trail, but I'm not seeing that trail. It's wasting my time because I'm not getting to the point of the thing I'm trying to research.
I was talking to someone last night about pretty much the same thing in the sense of, well, we were looking up, she had a, what are they called? Handpan drum. She recently got a handpan drum. So we were like trying to Google something about it. And there, like every article that she opened, she would have to read through like half a page of blog posts before she got to the information she wanted, right? And then that led us back to like, it's the same every time you try to look up a recipe online. You have to read someone's life story before you get to the ingredients list.
Yeah, exactly. But that's intentional. Like the way those websites work is to make you scroll through a bunch of ads.
Yeah,
Before you get
I
to the
mean,
content that
I
you're
very
looking
much
for.
know and understand it's intentional. It still is
Yeah,
annoying,
it
though.
is annoying.
It's why I would much rather just use ChatGPT because you ask a question and you get an answer.
Yeah, and a probably accurate answer.
At least as accurate as any random search on the internet is going to be, since if it doesn't know, it's just going to randomly search on the internet and probably come to that same website.
That's actually a good point. Like, I didn't even think about that use case. Like, if you wanted to just know how to cook something, it would immediately spit out a recipe list for you. That's a really good use case.
It does, yeah. It'll even like, it'll give you the full recipe list. It'll give you like the steps, and it will give you, I mean, yeah, it gives you everything you need for recipes without the extra addition blog post.
One thing that comes to mind
It'll even generate shopping lists for you. Like you can have it meal planned for a week and then tell you to tell it to generate a shopping list for like all of the meals in that week.
You heard of Cooking for Engineers?
No.
It's a website that basically puts recipes and the instructions in a table form. And it's like extremely easy to follow. There's like no bloat. It's like the most concise way you can put a recipe together.
Cooking for Engineers.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, it's actually pretty beautiful once I've seen it. I haven't actually used it, but I've seen it. It's like a really cool concept.
Maybe that's how I get Van into cooking.
Yeah.
Van loves spreadsheets.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're not monetized yet. How many subscribers do you have?
267 as of this morning.
Okay. Wow, you checked this morning.
It's just one thing you check when you wake up.
And how long did it take you to get to that number?
Well, I've been doing it since the spring of this year, so it's been like 7-8 months now.
Okay.
About.
How much do you like try to advertise or grow it, or do you just let it grow naturally?
I just let it grow naturally. Like one thing I noticed when signing up for this podcast thing is you have all those other socials. I don't have any of them. I don't have Instagram. I don't have TikTok. Whatever the heck else there is, I don't have. I only have a YouTube account for this.
There's like 25 social media platforms these days that
and I'm not really into them. So I don't want to bog down the whole media personality creation thing. Like it just doesn't seem like that's really the intent and the goal of this. I'm more just splicing the two intents, which are essentially a service for the community and the sport. Just create useful content that people can reference to fill that gap on Trail Forks, and then see if something comes about it in terms of monetization eventually. Like that would be a fun byproduct in my mind. It's not like I need that to survive. But if it happens, it'd be cool. Maybe I can keep growing it, do some stuff. I like get to know the industry better and maybe have more interactions that way. Like all these other bigger YouTubers, like some of them have sponsors and they interact with vendors for parts.
Very much so, yeah.
things.
You could have a bunch of mountain bike gear sponsors.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
And you'd get new gear out of it.
Yeah, so I think that would be cool if I eventually get there. So we'll see.
You mentioned that you don't do a lot of, so like your videos are specifically of like a full run start to finish of the trail.
Yeah.
But you also talked about editing, and that's how many of the videos that you've come across have been edited so that you don't see the full run start to finish. So what do you edit out? If you're keeping the full run start to finish, what parts do you edit?
Yeah, so not all my videos are the exact same format. So like I have some bike park videos. So there's a lot of trails in the bike park, and you kind of like chop up all the different trails and then place them in a kind of sensible order to present them. For a basic top to bottom run, I try to make the raw footage as clean as possible, so it takes the least amount of editing as possible. And if I could do that, it's literally just chopping off the ends and then putting it into YouTube and then doing the YouTube things where you put the cards on it, etc., and then ship it essentially. But there's a lot of other videos where I'm doing trails that are unsanctioned. I have a few unsanctioned trail videos, which means they're not on Trail Forks, they're not on a map.
Okay.
So
how do you find those trails?
You got to know people that know places.
All right.
Essentially, there's a little bit of projectionism, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. And you kind of know which ones are more okay to film and which ones aren't. It's just a vibe check thing. But
who are you vibe checking against?
Just the way people talk about the trails.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whether or not they consider it all holy and hallowed as...
Yeah, and the trail's age as well matters, I think.
Oh, okay.
So sometimes you'll make a more chopped up video just showing the cooler sections, because there's no point in showing the boring sections because that'll just negatively affect your retention.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So if you're kind of doing like a different kind of video that isn't a full Trail Forks showcase thing, then you can do it a little bit differently. I've also done some where you're challenging all of the features on the trail. So like one recently on Eagle Mountain called Randy's. I haven't done it in like years, and it's a pretty intense trail because it's got a whole bunch of jumps and like weird features on it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try all of these, but like it wouldn't even you can't even hit them all in one run, right? So
Multiple takes.
Because there's options and stuff. Yeah, so you go back up, do multiple takes. Yeah, I'm going to do this one. I'm going to try this one and do it this way. So you make a little bit more of a story out of it, and that takes more editing, but it's also fun.
Right.
So it's not always the same kind of video.
What's the biggest jump you've ever done? I'm like, that sounds terrifying to me. Going downhill on a mountain bike fast is already scary enough for me. To take a jump while doing it, it feels like I would just land and wipe out immediately.
Yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of jumps too, so it's hard to answer the question. And I don't measure, so I don't really know. I don't do like humongous jumps.
You don't have like laser measure eyes. You just look down. Yep,
no.
That's 25 feet right there.
No, I haven't done anything like that. Well, because I don't know. There's so many different factors to consider in what the difficulty of a feature is, including the conditions, but mostly the geometry of the feature, like what the run out looks like. Sure, you can measure height, but then all these other things matter. Like, what's the slope in and out? What, like, are you hucking to flat? Like, it's difficulty doesn't really scale equally just based on height.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the most challenging feature type?
Well, I guess that depends on the rider's skill sets, because that's also varied, and their preference as well. So you can go down to like gnarly steep sections, like those are pretty fun. I like those, and just because I like the kind of more finagly control aspect of mountain biking, where you've got all these different obstacles and different varying terrains, and like grip conditions that you're trying to deal with. So going through a challenging section that you're not necessarily jumping over is still really entertaining in most cases. And I really like steep rolls, for example. Like you basically kind of just like go off like a cliff-like section. You're in contact essentially the whole time, so it's not a jump. Right. So, but those are a lot of fun. I'm not much of a jumper. I'm working on my jumping. I've upgraded my jumping skills a lot this year, especially all the bike park trips that I've done. But they're different skill sets.
What's the worst wipeout you've ever had?
One on Seymour Mountain. I have some scars somewhere on this elbow. Or the other elbow, I forget. Like, yeah, you lose some skin sometimes. But a trail called Boogie Nights.
What a great name for a trail.
Which is a really flowy, big jump trail. And I was pretty new at the time. So I sent one of the bigger jumps in the middle of that trail. And I don't even remember because of the landing. I think I was grabbing some front brake on the landing, which washed out the front and essentially just slammed me down sideways with elbows to the ground kind of thing. It happened so fast. It's like the bike may as well have not even been there. Even though the bike wheels contact hit and then washed out, the whole motion was just like the body slamming to the ground anyways. And then sliding on like dust. Essentially, it was really dusty. Oh. So that doesn't help the grip conditions, and that's probably contributing to the wipeout factor.
Yeah.
And that's ever since I've worn elbow pads.
Do you wear any other padding?
Knee pads for sure.
Knee pads and elbow pads.
Highly recommended.
Helmet, undoubtedly.
Yes, and that's about it. I mean, I wear the knee pads that actually protect the shin too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever whacked your shins?
So pedal bite is a thing that's very common in mountain biking, especially when you're riding flats, which a lot, if not most people do. So the pedals have these pins on them nowadays to get extra grip on your shoes.
Okay.
And when you lose a pedal, it can rotate either front or backwards and slam into your shin or slam into your calf. So that's something that annoys people a lot, but it just hits my pad on the shin, so I don't get that bite, because it'll essentially just stab you, and you'll most likely bleed. If you go to a bike park, you'll sometimes you just watch people's calves. There'll be like 3 holes with blood's leaking out of their calves, but it's dried up.
Is that why they all wear tall socks to catch the blood as it's going down?
I don't know if they all wear tall socks, but yeah, it's a common sight. And then you're like, yeah, I can see exactly what happened there.
I know what you did yesterday.
Yeah.
Do you have any designs on expanding your YouTube channel out of mountain biking, or like creating other channels for because you're also a pretty avid rock climber, right?
Yeah. But biking took over my life and kind of squished rock climbing out of the way.
Okay, so
to be fair, so I haven't been in a long time.
You didn't really go rock climbing at all. It was mostly mountain biking.
Because I was just getting content for the channel, mountain biking like crazy all over the place. So the thing is with channel categorization, I think you need to be somewhat careful. Those two might make sense because they're both outdoor sports.
Yeah,
but you can't go too crazy because I think it might confuse YouTube.
I was having a conversation with Amanda about this for like determining how to play our channel. Because, like, so we're doing 3 podcasts, right? And, like, technically each of them have a very different theme, although, like, at the beginning, Buying in Atoms will seem kind of closer together. But there are plans for them to be branched off and be quite different later. Adam wants to do a kind of Dirty Jobs style thing where he goes to different places and essentially does that job for a day. Okay. His first one is going to be at an MMA gym.
Okay.
And the MMA... like the guy who owns the gym is basically just going to put him through the ringer for the day. So that's going to be fun.
That's the thing. Being an MMA instructor, I don't think you get that dirty.
No, well, I mean, it's not dirty. Like, Dirty Jobs wasn't dirty. Not all of the jobs were dirty in the sense that they get you dirty. They were dirty jobs in the sense that they're jobs that, like, normal people wouldn't want to do.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a lot of different skills and motivations to do certain jobs, but... Because I did martial arts, and the instructors are the ones on the side yelling at everybody else to do the dirty fighting. So they're the ones that are kind of in the luxury in those in the dojo,
true.
You know.
Although I think it sounded like he was going to put him. So like in this gym, the way that they work is instead of like hiring a personal trainer who you have to pay for a 1-hour session every time you go there, it sounds like what they do is like when you go and you sign up, you essentially get like a few sessions with your trainer where they create a very personalized routine for you, like a full-blown workout routine, MMA, diet, like they cover everything. And then they spend a few sessions like really getting you used to the routine, getting you used to the exercises. And then after that, instead of having to like pay your personal trainer for every time you're in the gym, you go in and you do your workout, and then the trainers just kind of like float around and then help people correct their posture or like answer questions and whatnot, kind of thing.
Yeah. It's a guided program essentially.
Yeah. So I think the idea was that they were going to record him as like a guided session in the beginning where they're like coming up with his routine.
Cool.
But I'm not 100% sure on that. We'll have to see when they. Anyway, back to the channel topic that I brought that up for in the first place. Because we were debating about whether or not having 3 podcasts on one channel was going to slow our growth or help it. Because like the more content that you have and the more regularly you put out content, the faster that helps the channel grow. But if the content is too varied, then like you said, it will confuse the algorithm. It doesn't know who exactly to promote your videos to, or it like doesn't grow them promote them as much because it doesn't think that they're in a specific category.
Yeah. So just because they're all podcasts or topical videos doesn't mean they all belong together. I think the topic that is covered matters more, right? Not the method of presentation. So I think you should watch out for that.
That is definitely, and like, I guess kind of the place that we've landed at so far is that like they are all podcasts with sort of an underlying theme of creativity, but about like creative endeavors, creative industry. Like Carl's is specifically about film crew, although Adam and me do also talk to film crew in ours. But so like Carl's is, he takes the same position from a union show and a non-union show and then compares the two. So like in one interview, he talks to like a production manager from union world. Another episode, he talks to a production manager from non-union world, and then just tries to like convey to the world the difference between the two different atmospheres on set, the different kinds of tools that they might have or lack thereof, depending on budget.
So is that a specific example of something that he covers in his To Be channel, or is he always going to be doing movie industry related things?
His podcast is specifically always about movie related things.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid category, and I think because that's a really interesting topic.
Absolutely.
To do a deep dive in an industry and how it works, and a lot of people would probably be searching for that kind of category specifically. So if your channel is about that, people are going to find that content. But if his channel is also about other things, then that's going to get diluted, and I think people are going to have a harder time finding that content. I mean, but like YouTube isn't stupid, right? Like the algorithm is pretty genius, and I think they're going to give associations not only at a channel level, they're going to give it on a video basis as well. I think it's just going to be easier for YouTube to find those associations and strengthen them if you make it more explicit, because the algorithm needs testing time. Nothing's stopping me from, I don't know, posting a video of me doing grocery shopping on my mountain biking channel, right? But then YouTube needs to figure that out.
Okay, but like, bear with me for a second here. What if you grocery shopped on your mountain bike?
Then it would be related.
Go through the whole store on your mountain bike with a GoPro and like try to make it so your foot never touches the ground. You have to keep balancing the whole time.
Yeah, that's fair. Track stands all day. That's a weird concept.
I honestly, if you made that video, that might be the only video on your channel that I watched. No offense, I don't mountain bike, so
exactly. Let's do some comedic stuff.
But I do grocery shop, so I can relate to grocery shopping, even if not on a mountain bike.
That brings up an interesting point, right? It's essentially topic crossover. So sure, your channel might only be about one topic, but if you want to get extra exposure, you can try to link it to others.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of what... well, I mean, all three of us on the whole, I guess, like the company overhead of Omnia Theater, I guess that's what we're trying to do. And essentially, like, since a lot of our conversations are with creative people who, like, everyone who is trying to build something has, like, in this industry, at least, the people that we've talked to so far, like, there is a social media aspect to all of them. If you're trying to grow awareness, you have to have some amount of social media, whether it's just a YouTube channel or if it's like just an Instagram or just a TikTok or if it's a combination of a whole bunch of them kind of thing, right? But since like all of the people that we have on the show are largely creators of some sort with some sort of following, the hope and the dream is that like by our followings combined, we help everyone's followings grow more.
Yeah, I mean, that's exposure, right?
Yeah. We're also like fortunate enough, one of the guests that Adam had on his show was on a reality television series for being a top underwear model.
Oh, that's cool.
So he has 30,000 Instagram followers.
Nice. So did Adam's show get more following as a result?
We haven't launched anything yet. We're currently building our backlog of content. So we have a release schedule.
Right.
We have about 20 episodes recorded so far. I think you're actually 21.
It's a lot.
Yeah. And the idea was just like, one, it's a convenient time right now since a lot of the people we're talking to are in the movie industry, and with the strike, it just worked out. And also, we didn't want to get ourselves in a position where we were hunting for guests every week and being stressed out about having to record and then edit and get it out there, where like you put a little bit more time in at the beginning to build out a few weeks of backlog, and now you don't have to worry about that.
Are you worried about consistency in terms of posting schedule? That's the underlying tone I'm kind of hearing, right? Like if you don't have something ready to go next week.
A little bit. I think at the beginning, especially, we would like to keep a posting schedule. Because like the idea, like to some degree, rather than thinking of this as like a single podcast, I kind of think of this as like a new TV station in a sense. Like we're not starting I guess like let's take the example of like a YouTube channel to the extreme so that it is a channel with like multiple series or shows, whatnot, that it's kind of displaying.
So that's an interesting concept, and I think a lot of people get really caught up in that, which is the consistent posting schedule. So most new people coming to YouTube, I think, just like me, would think that you need to post consistently in order to, retain viewers that may expect that they're going to see your next episode at a certain time or whatever. But I think there's a lot of guidance and kind of, I don't know about research because I haven't actually researched that much, but I think it's irrelevant. I don't think it's that important. And the way your videos get pushed is affected by your adjacently published videos. So there's a lot of different considerations in terms of how you consider schedule, but I wouldn't worry about being obsessed over a consistent cadence.
I don't definitely like some of the most prominent podcasts that I follow don't have a specific cadence that they follow. The two main examples that I always come back to, because they're the two podcasts that I watch the most frequently, are the Lex Friedman Show and the Huberman Lads podcast. And I think both of them tend to, like, they post sometimes a video a week, sometimes, like, they don't post for a month. Albeit, like, at this point, both of those channels are huge and have been around for many years, so it doesn't really matter all that much for them. But I think, at least at the beginning, I wanted to have a somewhat specific posting schedule, but as much for us as for viewers, just to like keep especially when the channel and podcast series are young, when there's not a lot of content out yet, like it gives us a little more motivation to just like make sure we're putting out content to keep building up the portfolio. Yeah. Once you have a large portfolio of content out there, it becomes less relevant, right? Because like people that are finding you new will go back and watch old episodes and they'll have like 100 episodes to choose from.
Yeah. So essentially you're creating a KPI out of actually posting something in terms of measuring your productivity.
Yeah.
Which I would caution against, just because one thing adhering to a forced posting cadence might do is impair the quality of your videos. Like you should really do the necessary rounds of editing to get to the quality level of editing, especially for a podcast like this where you're probably going to chop it up severely and then maybe even post different videos of the same raw cut for covering different topics because we've been all over the place.
Absolutely.
Right? So
yes, every conversation is potential for many different pieces of content.
Yeah, and maybe this conversation is about how to structure your YouTube posting cadence and methodology or whatever. But so you really want to post something when it's ready. You don't want to feel like you could have put more work into it, because if you could have, then maybe you would have gotten more views and retention out of it. Like editing for retention is a skill in itself. Like there's editing and there's all those different subset categories of why you're editing. Mm-hmm. So editing for retention is obviously very important, right? You want to keep the person engaged in the video, and that's going to really help drive up how much YouTube pushes it. So that's one thing you want to consider. You don't want to just throw it out there, throw the video up onto YouTube just because you need to meet a schedule. Because I think we come up with this idea that the viewer wants the schedule. But if you think about the use case of somebody going onto YouTube, people will open the app, and what's the first thing you see in the app? You see 20 thumbnails, right? They're not going... It's very rare that somebody clicks on the YouTube icon to open that app to go to your video. That's not the idea that really triggers, oh, I want to go to YouTube to watch this specific thing right now. And even if you do have that idea, the first thing that you see is 20 thumbnails and you probably get immediately distracted and then just watch something else. Right?
Is that how you YouTube? So like,
most of the time.
typically, I guess the most common way that I use YouTube these days is like when I open it, I do glance at the first, like the thumbnails that it drops you on, of course. But mostly I look at my sub list on the side to see which of the subs that I follow on a regular basis has posted a new video. I usually have probably around like somewhere between 5 and 10 channels that I'll follow like actively every week kind of thing. And sometimes those cycle out, get replaced by new channels kind of thing, whatever. But usually I'll only click on one of the thumbnails on the landing page if it's one of those channels' thumbnails.
Yeah, so if you sub to something, there's a higher chance that the thumbnail ends up on your landing page.
Yeah.
And then the amount at which you engage with your subscriptions also affects the probability that it gets pushed to you on the landing page. But that's kind of the point I'm getting at is YouTube will figure out what you want to watch, and they're going to push that to you, regardless if you're subbed to it. Like they have you figured out in terms of categories that you like.
That's a very good point. I've been getting more and more recommendations for things I'm not subbed to that are very close to other things that I've watched.
Yeah. And kind of driving back to why the cadence is irrelevant, because your audience is essentially, I don't know if chaotic is the right word, but like in terms of who logs onto YouTube to watch things, that the people doing that all the time, and people who fit your category are people whose interests your category fall into are going to be on and off YouTube kind of all the time, like because it reaches the whole world. Like if you look at the back end as a creator and you see where in the world people are watching the videos, it's all over the place. It's not just Canada, because we're here.
Where is your video, or where have your videos been most popular so far?
Well, Canada is number one, but that's not even the majority. It's like 20-something%. Then there's like the States, a whole bunch in Asia, like India, like Indonesia is big for some reason. Like I don't understand why, but these are all in single percentage points, but it spreads out so all over the world.
Right.
So picking a time of the day too is kind of irrelevant, because like
time of day means nothing. I mean, personally, to me, time of day doesn't mean anything regardless. Time is 100% a human concoction. Like it is a prison we've made for ourselves. And it is like a lot of people let it rule their lives.
So I pick 6 p.m. on my local time just arbitrarily every day, just in the idea that you might catch people after they come home from work and maybe click on the YouTube app. But it's not necessary that the video that I posted at that time is actually going to be pushed at that time, because the algorithm hasn't picked it up and decided to push it yet. So that timing is also out of your control anyways.
Right.
So it doesn't even matter.
That's actually something interesting I've never thought about. The posting time does not correlate to the time when people will start seeing your video.
Yeah, from a pushing perspective, right? I don't know how many people do your strategy, which is, oh, look at my sub list, or even get fully notified by their subs. So they say, oh, there's a new video to watch. Let's watch it right now.
Well, I don't look for notifications. I just I guess very much so on your comment about how like people go on at sporadic times. Like, I guess kind of largely gone are the days where people like get home from work and like 8 o'clock they sit down at the TV and think I'm going to watch my show at 8 o'clock. No, it's like they get home from work at like 6:30 and they're making dinner and they throw on a podcast in the background while they're making dinner. They don't care what time it was uploaded. They don't care like when it starts or when it finishes. If they even finish it in that setting, they might pause it and then finish it another time.
Yeah. So in general, I wouldn't stress about posting cadence. If you want to discipline your work cycle to have a productive output, I wouldn't measure it by the amount of videos that you're pushing. I would try to figure out something more upstream of that to measure. Like maybe how many hours are you actually spending editing? Obviously, you don't want to stall out, right? It's kind of like the musician's quandrum as well.
The stall out part, I guess, is the thing that was our biggest concern, which at this point, we already have enough of a backlog that like we have pretty much a month worth of time to make new videos and post. So like considering it took us 2 weeks to make that much of a backlog, we definitely overestimated how much time we would need to continue the cycle.
Yeah, it's hard to figure out what the right balance is, but you tune yourself over time, right? You figure out you don't want to spend 100 hours editing a 5-minute video on your first YouTube video because it's like, what are you doing? You want to test out how YouTube even works first, and you'll figure it out, right? You'll figure out what the right amount is. I think, I don't know if certain people are going to tend more to one end of the spectrum or the other, whether they're going to edit too much or edit too little, but you'll figure it out. I don't know what the right rule of thumb is because every type of video will probably have a different amount of editing required. So you can't prescribe like, oh, maybe if it's a 10-minute video, you should spend 2 hours editing it or whatever.
It really depends on the type of video you're making. Depends.
So there's no really hard set rules, but yeah, I just wouldn't get too worked up off of whether you're posting a video every Friday or if you're spending 40 hours a week doing a combination of recording and editing and like data management and like content management on YouTube and thumbnail creation. Like there's a whole bunch of different things you can work on, right? Maybe you can just measure how much effort you're actually putting into those things and maybe the distribution. But whether that culminates into a video being posted every Friday, like I don't know if that's the right measurement in terms of strategy and when you're creating a new channel.
How frequently do you record videos versus post them? Like, because you've said, like, from your perspective, try not to care about a posting schedule. Like, how frequently do you actually go mountain bike and record these trails versus, like, when you post the video?
Yeah, so it depends on life schedule a little bit, too, and obviously the time of the year. So in the summer, it's pretty heavy. You're going out a lot and getting a lot of recordings where when I was doing those bike park videos, I was struggling with hard drive space.
You don't want to do a winter segment in our pouring rain?
It is just challenging for the recording things. Like people do it, but like you gotta wipe the lens. You don't even know if there's water on it. There's water splashing everywhere. So like, and I've done some rides and I've recorded them in the pouring rain and stuff recently. And I watched the footage and it's just bad. So I'm like, I'm not going to post this because like, it's just bad. I wouldn't want to watch it, I'm not going to post it, right? Like,
100%.
Like that's kind of the bottom line of consideration of whether you're
yeah,
post
if
something.
the creator doesn't like it, then like, why should anyone else?
Yeah, exactly. So like, there's challenging conditions for lighting outside when it's raining. It's actually quite a bit darker than when it's just cloudy. The most ideal outside conditions when you're doing outside filming is overcast, but at a high sun level. If it's overcast and it's like 6 p.m. or too early in the morning, then it's actually quite dark. And you have to consider that most mountain biking happens in the forest, so you have all this extra shade. The reason you want it overcast but high sun is you want it generally bright enough so that you have light in the forest, but then you get the diffuse light of the clouds, which makes no shadows from all the trees and bushes and branches that you're going through, right? Because if you when you have no shadows, then everything becomes super clear and flatly lit, so you can actually see the different rocks and roots and whatever you're going over. It makes it really crisp. You can pull up 2 videos from my channel or whatever later, and then you can see one where it was sunny with no clouds, and you see all these different shadows of the trees above, and it makes it really hard to see the trail. So that's one thing.
That's a good point.
That's one thing I see as unfortunate. I don't like posting those videos as much as the ones where it's overcast because it's like, oh, this is perfect lighting. Everybody, the person wanting to see this trail can see it perfectly. They can see all the features crisp, and they can see like the angles and the pebbles literally. Whereas,
you could be on a lighting crew.
Well, I don't think you set up a lighting crew on a whole mountain biking trail for when you're biking it to make it nice.
Depends if they're shooting a film or not.
Yeah.
We actually, one of the shows that I was working on, so it was when I was working on Virgin River season 2, and I had just finished a pilot literally the night before. I was working on a pilot called Close Up, and we wrapped in Tawasin at 5 a.m. on Friday morning. And I had to be at Cypress Mountain for 7 a.m. on Friday morning.
For another set?
Yeah, because I knew my last day was on Thursday, but I didn't know Thursday was like the Fratterday Thursday that's actually like Friday morning. I found out like 2 days before, like, oh, by the way, we don't start until 5 p.m. on Thursday. And so I told the Tal on my other show, I was like, hey, so I know you have me booked. I'm sorry, but I just found out that this is a night shoot. Like, can you replace me by any chance? Because like I'm gonna be exhausted. I can't come like work that day. She was like, well, you're just like receiving a drop off of gear, and you're just like sitting and waiting for greens to come make a berm for a mountain bike scene.
You did a mountain bike scene, cool.
Yeah. So I'll ask the ALM, but I'm pretty sure you can just sleep in your car. And she got back to me and she was like, yeah, he said it's fine. You could just sleep in your car. I was like, all right, sure. So I got off at 5 a.m. I drove to Cypress. I got there like 45 minutes early. And I was like, all right, I'll take a nap. So I start trying to nap. I finally start dozing off. And half an hour from when the gear is supposed to be delivered, I get a phone call from the delivery company trying to figure out like where they're going, where to drop things off. And at this point, Cypress Mountain, because this is like October, it's so foggy up there that I didn't even, like, I had to pull over and stop my car just in a random spot because I was like literally scared I was going to like drive off the side of the mountain because I couldn't see shit. Like even 5 feet in front of me, I couldn't see anything.
Wow.
And finally, the like 6:45, the gear shows up. We unload it. Around like 8 o'clock, the fog goes away. And I just spend the rest of the day like sitting in my car or walking around the parking lot waiting for greens to show up so they can shovel like 4 shovels of dirt and make a little like hill for them to catch with the mountain bike. Yeah.
Where are you filming? Like, what was the riding?
They were doing a stunt scene off of one of the trail. It was like a trail behind the parking lot that goes to a service road and up the mountain. And it connected to one of the trails that they had built for the Olympics that like wasn't really used anymore. But essentially they started at the top of the mountain, and then it was like a 5-minute like ride down the hill. They had a little jump. They landed, hit the berm that I had to watch greens make, and then they go down the hill off camera, and that was it.
Weird. You know what show that was for?
Virgin River, season 2.
So there's some kind of mountain biking scene in that show?
Yeah. The show takes place in Northern California, and there was like some mountain biking competition in that season or something like that.
Okay.
They were doing, because it's supposed to be like small town California. They always do like an outdoor community fair picnic kind of scene thing. So like in season 2, they had, they always shoot this community fair in October, like late October, when our weather is turning to shit, when it's supposed to take place in California and be sunny and beautiful. So the first year, or I guess my first year, season 2, because I didn't work on season 1, we filmed it at Deer Lake Park. And during the week of prep, it was sunny, it was beautiful, it was great. And the week that we came to shoot this fair, like they had built we went to this, like in one of the fields, they built a big stage, they set up a ton of tents, they made it look like a full-blown community fair kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And the week they went to shoot it, it poured rain. Like, turned the entire place into a mud pit. There was, like, a horse and some goats, too, because there was, like, a little petting zoo aspect to it. So, like, they trampled the grass, made everything look like shit. And they had to move around, like, 3 of the shooting days because, like, everything that they were trying to get that was supposed to be sunny was just, like, raining and miserable. And because that wasn't enough to teach them their lesson, the next year they decided to do this on Grouse Mountain at the end of October.
End of October, Jesus.
And I worked 1 day of prepping it. It was the last day of prep on a Friday before they went to camera on Monday. And on that day, We started getting word earlier in the day that night there was going to be like 70-mile-an-hour winds. And part of this prep, again, is setting up all of these tents for a community fair kind of thing, right? So they set up all these tents and they like zip walls onto them to keep everything inside safe. And they like zap strapped frames to the tent side to like make stands and walls and stuff in these tents and like set up the tables and put a bunch of stuff on them and whatnot. And the set deck crew went home around like 5 o'clock. We were getting ready for the rest of the crew to pack up and leave. And at like 5:30, the winds hit and just started like throwing the tents down the field.
The whole set's destroyed,
Yeah.
essentially.
So literally the entire day of work that Set Deck did was complete write-off. Like we used every sandbag that was on the hill to weigh down the tents just so they wouldn't blow away again. All of the stuff inside of all of the tents was knocked over and like just everywhere. And like we were the last people down on the gondola before they shut down the gondola because the winds were too bad. So like the mountain was shut down for the rest of the night unless you were like one of the service trucks that went up the back way.
Yeah.
And then on Monday, their first day of camera, it snowed like 1.5 feet on them.
Like sunny California?
Yeah.
Yeah, just don't film here in November. I've just given up right now.
Especially if you're trying to convey a sunny climate, film it in the summer. It's not rocket science. You can figure it out.
Yeah, we usually get records in November specifically here for how much rainfall there is.
Well, yeah, and like almost every year there's some huge, like whether it's a flood or a big storm that knocks power out for like half of the city or like knocks down a bunch of trees somewhere. Every year there's one of these things.
Yeah. So weather plays a huge effect into the quality of the footage that you get.
Yes.
It's a lesson learned, I guess.
I mean, you're an engineer. You could make a little windshield wiper for your camera.
It's just not worth it. You gotta maintain it, and test it, and just hours and hours of work.
Do you, like, kind of on that note, do you 3D print things much anymore? Because there was a while when you guys were 3D printing a lot of shit, right?
Yeah, I just started up this morning, actually, to 3D print something for a friend. They got some random idea. They got something off of the internet, and it's like, hey, can you print this? Sure.
Do you ever 3D print, like, parts or components for your biker channel?
Not for the bike. Like, you can't, like... I don't know, a bike needs to be really structurally sound. Like you can't really replace anything on a bike with a 3D printed part. Like
you could make a little mount for a flashlight on your handlebars.
Yeah, I guess you could if it's not part of the integrity of the bike. Sure, I'm thinking maybe like handlebar grips. You could probably structure like the sleeves are made of plastic. Like maybe you could 3D print those and then put the rubber on top and then make a clamping system. But I think they might explode eventually. Like PLA layering is not that strong compared to any kind of
I guess
molded
mountain
cast
biking is
plastic.
pretty high stress.
Yes, huge amount of repetitive stress.
Yeah,
in every direction. So yeah, I don't know. I think 3D printing is more suited for like maybe organizational things like drawer organizers or like shop organizers or like hooks and small pieces to do anything with. Like you can repair some stuff legitimately with 3D printed parts.
Yeah, my previous car before this one, there was like a hook system for the trunk cover because it was a hatchback. The hooks on it had broke off, so I just 3D printed some new hooks for it.
Perfect application. Right?
Yeah.
Simple, low stress applications. 3D printing is awesome. Save so much money.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a fun hobby too. Like playing with 3D softwares, it's intimidating at first until you like figure out how to use them, but modeling things is fun.
Yeah, there's a bit of a learning curve, which I guess gets squished anyways by the fact that you probably need to do it sometimes in your job as an engineer. So once you have that, it's kind of a freebie. But for people who don't do it as part of their job, then you still got to spend like the 20 to 40 hours to learn how to do 3D software stuff. So that's a bit of a hurdle. But yeah, it is fun.
Do you do much CAD work in your job, or are you mostly
Not
coder?
anymore. A long time ago, different jobs I did CAD work. Now I just do software. Yeah.
Do you, I mean, I have an expectation for this answer, but do you consider software creative?
Well, yes, that probably matches your expectation.
Absolutely, yeah. So, what parts of software development do you like? Where is the creativity in software development to you?
Well, I think there's creativity kind of in every aspect of problem solving. Doesn't really matter what the medium is, right? So I was eventually expecting at some point during this conversation that we'd try to define what creativity means.
We're getting there. We're leading up to it right now, actually.
And I thought about it quite a bit, and it's kind of difficult to define, and you risk running into a circular argument if you define creativity as essentially the combination of motivation and ability to create or make something. So then what is creating or making something? And I think that is manipulating the environment around you to create to create value, but then you use the word create again in that definition, so that doesn't really work. And that doesn't actually cover all of it, because you're not always manipulating the environment around you in creativity, because you can make really non-tangible things that are creative as well. And I guess software comes to mind there.
Yeah. That's actually, like, there could be an argument for software being tangible and non-tangible.
Yeah, tangibility is not like a binary thing, it's a scale.
Tangibility is non-tangible.
That too. So creativity in problem solving is like the two are inextricably linked, right?
Absolutely.
So you can solve a problem more than one way, which means you're essentially creating value by solving the problem, and that in itself is creativity. Like you can't unlink the two, and it doesn't matter if the problem is tangible or not. You're still applying creativity when you're solving a problem.
Yes, yeah, that is definitely, I think, one of the more common answers or perspectives is that creativity is problem solving that I've heard so far. I mean, and it absolutely is, because if you try to solve something by approaching it in the exact same way every time, you're not going to solve it. You're just going to drive yourself mad.
Yeah, well, especially if you're not getting results. That's why. If you're getting results, then you won't go mad.
Well, I mean, if you're getting results, you don't need to try the same thing. You've just solved it the first time.
Yeah, I mean, getting wanted results, I guess. Results by themselves can be good or bad. But yeah, in software, there's a lot of creativity because you have flexibility in what you're writing. You use a lot of ways to write any given functionality, but you get the same functionality output anyways. So
right.
There's a lot with how you, especially naming things. So you can name things in a lot of different ways.
There can be some fun class and variable names in software.
Yeah, but in general, for productivity's sake, there's definitely incorrect ways to go about naming things. And a lot of people kind of, I think, overlook that when writing software, and they get caught up with definitions that essentially don't need to exist because things are named incorrectly.
Do you have any examples of that?
Literally, when you read software, if you don't know what something is or why it's in a piece of code that you're reading, it's oftentimes because it means something else. So why was it written as that when it means this, when it could have been named this instead of that, right? Then you wouldn't have to make an association. So that's often incorrect naming. It's because when you write software, oftentimes the functionality changes as you're writing it, and then you don't change the variable names or you don't change the function names to re-represent what they actually are. So if their actual functions or representations change over time and you don't fix that, then you're essentially, you get a bunch of lies, right? So, and then
tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies.
Just lies in the forms of not presenting the names of things as to what they literally are, and just causes confusion, which is a detriment to productivity in the software world.
Right, because now you need to go look through things to figure out what it is. Yeah. Sometimes you need to go make more changes because you didn't change it earlier. Or You just end up with a bunch of errors because you're not calling things properly.
Yeah. So oftentimes you have conversation like what is that and what is it doing? And then when you talk to somebody like whoever you're peer programming with, and you answered those two questions, what is it and what is it doing? Then you can't even avoid coming up with what it actually should be named, because you literally just talked about what it is and what is it doing, and you probably used nouns and adjectives.
So why isn't it called that?
So why isn't it called that? Then change the damn name so you can actually read, objects that are actually named to represent what they are.
What language do you guys work in?
So we do software for industrial machines. So it's kind of a variety. We have a lot of different applications. So you'll get the classic ones like C++ or C#. We don't do like Java or any kind of web stuff.
It's largely irrelevant for your use case.
Yeah. So some lower level stuff. And then also like industrial softwares, like some PLC coding softwares and some HMI coding softwares, which are just custom mishmash IDEs. Like they're not really relatable even to any of the stuff you learn in school in terms of like, when you learn C or whatever in school.
That was actually my next question for you coming off of that was like, how much of these softwares and information did you learn in school that was actually relevant? How much of it did you learn like in the industry while you started working?
Well, software is highly transferable, just generically speaking. It doesn't really matter what the language is.
That's true. There's a lot of base concepts that are usable in all of them.
Yeah, like syntax is almost irrelevant when you're considering whether or not you can develop some software. It's just the underlying ideas and skills and how you go about structuring ideas to achieve a certain functionality. Because syntax can easily be searched up or generated for you using ChatGPT,
yes,
or,
that is.
or whatever
I've
other
been
tools.
doing that a lot lately.
Yeah. You can just also look up the profuse amounts of libraries and help files or whatever it is on whatever language you're doing. So
yeah, especially, I mean, right now I have mostly been working in Python because of AI stuff, and like there's just so much material on coding AI stuff in Python. Like you almost, I mean, you could do it without ChatGPT because there's so much information, but ChatGPT makes it faster just because you ask a question, get an answer.
Yeah, I think there's value in getting a broader perspective in terms of the depth, in terms of like high level software versus low level software, which is larger overarching ideas. Like when you're in Python, you're not bit bashing, whereas when you're in like C or doing some kind of like machine level coding, you're at a register level kind of thing. And just, I guess, understanding and linking the two worlds helps. Just having that broader understanding gives you more tools and ideas and how to achieve certain functionalities depending on what you want to do. Because you could draw perspectives from both worlds and in between. Obviously, it's not like there's two levels, right? It's a whole scale.
To relate that to the creativity as problem solving, like you literally have a bigger toolbox of things to pull out of for helping you solve that problem.
Yeah. So when you talk about transferability of software, like you get different transferability depending on what you were working on. But in general, the basic ideas of what you learn in school, regardless of what the language is, are applicable kind of anywhere. So it just takes time to learn new IDEs, really.
So I should have spent more time paying attention in my CMPT 128 class and less time watching South Park on the iTouch that I found.
Yeah, but South Park is fun to watch.
It is. And also the professor that I had was very not fun to watch. She was the most droll, boring professor I have had in my entire university career. And like there were some not fantastic professors in the mechatronics program at SFU, but this CMPT 128 professor was just like her voice had one tone. So like the epitome of monotone. Most monotone people have some variance in their tone. Not her. The only variance in her tone was when she had the sniffles, and like literally all day, every day in every class, she would have a tissue and she would have one tone of talking and one tone of sniffle. One tone of talking, one tone of sniffle. So I watched South Park instead.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things I've found recently is the crossover to kind of every other aspect of life when you think about audience retention. Literally any job, you could benefit in having a skill set with regards to audience retention. That's one thing I've acquired through the YouTube channel.
That's an extremely interesting point. I've never considered before.
Yeah, because when you're doing any kind of presentation for any work or whatever, like you're preparing a slideshow, you're speaking in front of an audience. When I review people's slides, I now review for audience retention, which I previously did not do. I'm like, that slide's boring, it has too many words on it. The order of the slides needs to progress in a certain way to not let people drop off, right?
Right.
And you can measure that just by watching the room.
Yeah, how engaged people are.
But if you don't have those metrics ahead of time, you can still make some educated guesses on how the slides are structured, etc. But given the professor example, like, I don't know how incentivized they are to retain audiences, but obviously there's a rating system, I think, for profs, but you can see how audience retention applies to a lot of different jobs.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny you brought it up because I've been delivered a lot of random tidbits of advice, or it's come up a lot in like random YouTube videos, like the algorithm doing its work, I guess, but like know your audience and like think about your audience while you're making your content kind of thing is a recurring theme that I feel like has been thrown in my face probably 24 times in the last 2 weeks, just randomly. So I think the universe is trying to tell me to consider my audience.
Well, yeah, that's legit advice right there. Who do you think your audience is?
You know, that's a tricky question. I'm not 100% sure yet. I want to say my audience is people like me and people like my other two friends that are hosting their shows because we are similar, and so far we have all enjoyed each other's shows, which suggests that our content is enjoyable to people like us. Mm-hmm. So it seems like our audience currently is roughly millennial age people with ADHD that largely have some interest in film and television or music. So far, that seems like probably the audience we're shooting at.
Or creativity as a topic?
Yeah, like, I mean, creativity as a topic, I think one of the reasons why Film Crew ends up being a great fit for us and the people that we talk to is that film attracts all of the people that do not belong in regular society. And that tends to be creative people in the sense that, like, they're people that don't fit in other industries. They can't stand sitting behind a desk for a 9-to-5 job. They, like, lots of them are covered in tattoos. They have, like, a clothing store side hustle or some other kind of merch store online, or they've got a YouTube channel, or they're in 3 bands that they practice with, like, every weekend kind of thing. Like, yeah. Almost everyone in film has creative side hustles that they are funding through their work in film.
That's cool. I would caution against categorizing anything as regular society.
Fair enough. Yeah. And nothing is regular society, which is why that's kind of like I don't like it when anyone talks about being normal or what a normal person is, because there is no such thing as a normal person. There's one way to fit in, and that is to be yourself. Yeah. And that necessitates that you are different from everyone else.
Yeah, pretty much. Otherwise, you're just referring to cliched ideals, I guess, which is pointless.
Yeah, very much so. Although I am, based on you saying that, what advice are you, what sparked in your mind that made you state that you are trying to convey as advice to me? Because it could be useful.
Well, I don't know. I think you just mentioned that people in the film industry are not part of regular society, but I wouldn't say that, right? Regular society expands all throughout all of the different things that people do. I guess it just kind of relates.
I know a lot of people in film that would happily describe themselves as not part of regular society because of it, though.
Yeah, I guess that sounds like some kind of like a rejection. I don't know what the right word is. Not a lot of mentality, but like some kind of a construct in their mind of not belonging, I guess, like a belonging construct.
I mean,
Which
I do
guess
describe film as the island of misfit toys.
yeah, yeah. But then again, what doesn't make sense to me is that the film industry employs some ridiculous percentage of this entire city. So for them to be considered separate and not belonging doesn't make sense fractionally, right?
That is a fantastic point. It does. Recently the number I heard was around 80,000 people.
Yeah, which is like huge. Like
for our population, absolutely.
For a population of, if you consider the greater area, I guess. I don't know how far east it extends and all around, but we're 2 million something people, maybe, depending on where you draw the borders. So 80,000 people is a huge fraction.
I think for film, essentially, like kind of around Maple Ridge is where we draw the line for like what is considered in area.
Yeah. And I guess it relates back to when we were talking about music previously, where there is a tendency for obsessive categorization. And I don't know what instinct that comes from, but everybody kind of does it, where you say you either belong to this category or you don't. And then...
Dude, it is almost like an ingrained human necessity to overcategorize things. Like, I feel that way about psychology and politics. Like, literally everyone feels obsessed to try and label everything.
Yeah, and then label us. It's because people want to label by association and then create associations. And I guess that has an, I think, evolutionary and instinctual basis for survival purposes, if you look into it. Basically, because you want to know about similar things based on a past experience. And be able to associate danger or not or whatever based on past experiences. That's why we do categorization instinctively, is to reduce load on the mind and have these automatic responses to things that are similar. But then that creates a huge amount of biases.
Yes,
which
a massive amount of biases.
People should be at least cognizant of, and then try to avoid, because you lose opportunities if you apply too many biases, essentially, in the way you see the world. So if you see the world super categorically, then I think you miss out on the granularity.
Well, yeah, because the world isn't discrete. It's not on or off, yes or no. It's very much a signal. There is continuous waveform the whole way through.
Yeah, so I wouldn't want to categorize everybody in film as misfits. That's what I'm getting at.
All right, fair enough. Okay, let's pull this back now and actually ask that question. What does creativity mean to you? I mean, we talked about a decent amount of it, that it's problem solving, and circular definitions.
A lot of people will associate creativity with art. And I have difficulty in trying to define a broader circle that kind of encompasses all creation as creative, because people might have a difficulty in seeing non-artistic things as an expression of creativity. But I don't know.
That is something I've definitely noticed in a lot of people that don't consider themselves creative. They think that because they don't have more traditionally artistic creative skills, but they do have creative skills.
Yeah, exactly. So like creation for the sake of productivity or the creation of value for yourself or your friends or society as a whole. I don't know, when you go to work and you create value, you're applying a certain level of creativity. I mean, you should at least try to.
I mean, it makes us feel good to help move society along. Like, it helps give people purpose to have something to work towards.
And usually you improve the way something is done at your work, or you apply some kind of level of problem solving to improve a process or whatever, even though it's so intangible, you're actually creating something by doing so. So I wouldn't restrict creativity to just artistic creation.
Well, I have almost the opposite. I don't know. Opposite doesn't quite feel like the right word, but like, I wouldn't restrict creativity to art. I would say that anything can be artistic in a way that a lot of people don't realize. Like, for example, I wouldn't consider myself traditionally artistic in the sense that I can't like paint or draw very well. But I do very much consider, like, for me, starting my business and trying to grow it, that is a form of art. and like my business is part of my art portfolio.
Yeah. A huge amount of creativity. I mean, look at this wall.
I can't take credit for the wall. Amanda did that.
Well, she's a creative one.
She is, absolutely. She is the person that takes the pretty things I see in my head and helps me make them in real life, because there is some kind of motor disconnect between what I see in my brain and what my hands are capable of creating.
Yeah. I guess that's where I was getting at with the difference, or I guess the two pieces needed is motivation and ability to get to the end product of something creative, or the output of creativity. Doesn't mean you're not creative just because maybe you lack the ability. You can find other ways to express that creativity through a medium being somebody else's skills, like you just mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, I think this is one of the things that generative AI tools can help a lot of people with too, right? Is because, like, I have always been more of a writer. I love words. I love wordsmithing. And, like, I also love pretty images, but I can't, like, make a pretty image out of words until now, because I can give an AI generator a bunch of my pretty words and it will give me a pretty picture out of it.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, that's something that's been a dream of mine for probably a decade or more, because I've always wanted to be able to draw well, and I've never put in enough time to learn how to do it properly.
Yeah, that's a skill in itself, being able to pictorially represent something with lines on whatever. It's useful, being able to convey ideas that way. The AI stuff's been pretty interesting lately, though. The developments are coming pretty far. Some people have been sending me some pictures of stuff recently. It's kind of funny.
Very far. And the advancements are happening very quickly compared to what, like, advancements were already happening quickly, like, as of last November when OpenAI released ChatGPT, but, like, the hockey curve is definitely accelerating, the hockey stick curve. Like, pretty much every week there is a new big announcement that is, like, bigger than the announcements from the week before. One of the biggest ones, like this week, OpenAI added a bunch of new functionality to their API that, like, I mean, the things, they now have, like, persistent long-term memory in a conversation with no limited context window. So, like, they expanded the immediate context window to 128,000 tokens, which is like 100,000 words, which is, like...
Yeah, because I knew there was contextual memory based on what
Yeah,
conversations
it's like
you started with
4
AI.
times larger than their
now
old context window.
You can go deeper down in the conversation and it'll still remember more things from up top.
Yeah. But then on top of that, they've also added, they call it a thread, but essentially what it does is for every message in the conversation, it makes a text embedding, which is a tokenized vector representation of the paragraph. So instead of being like 100 words, it's like 20 tokens kind of thing. So it, like, massively condenses the size of it. And you can repeatedly, like, re-summarize those chunks to make it easier and more efficient for it to search through the information. And so, like, now essentially all of your conversation gets embedded and vectorized, and it can search through your entire previous thread history, even if it's gone past the context length.
Does that mean it's inferring information across different conversations now?
Based on the, like, I was playing around with it last night, and I was trying to figure out if it could do just that, because I had a conversation going, and then in that thread, it was starting to give me a bunch of errors. Like, I had uploaded too many documents to it or something, and it was having a hard time, like, generating the response from a certain document that I was trying to get it to read.
Okay.
And I asked it if it could communicate between threads if it was the same, like, assistant model. And the answer that it gave me implied that as long as, because you can connect a model to a thread. So as long as the model is connected to a thread, then yes. So if you're doing it programmatically instead of through their system, you can switch different models, or, like, you can essentially have a thread connected to multiple models and then have the output, the input and output for that thread be determined by any of the models at once.
Okay. I wonder if you can just explicitly ask the AI to refer to one of your other conversations, and it would just do that.
It didn't seem like it was doing that directly last night when I was trying. It seemed like it was trying to do it, but it was hitting a wall, and I don't know if that's... They've also, like, because they just released these new features this week, they've been completely bogged down with people, like, using their new features, and also they've been getting a DOS attack, so they've been experiencing a lot of reliability issues this week.
Yeah, you probably get a lot of delays in service then.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're... So, in your day job as an engineer, and I mean, let's rephrase this. You have a lot of what I would consider creative hobbies between the 3D printing, like mountain biking. Physical hobbies are creative in a different way because they require like real-time problem solving kind of thing, I guess. Like similar to how you mentioned when you're going down the hill, you're looking for different patches of variable traction depending on like the terrain that you hit. Maybe it's gravelly, maybe it's leafy, maybe it's really dusty in a spot, right? And if you're going down a really steep hill, you kind of need to optimize like the path that you take down the hill. You need to make sure you're not going to hit a branch and go flying kind of thing.
I guess if you're racing, but like by all means, there's a million different ways you can hit the same trail. So you definitely have creativity and style and how you tackle those obstacles.
Yeah, absolutely. So where I'm going with this is the creativity that you experience or portray in those physical hobbies that you have. How would you compare it to the creativity from like your engineering role? Because that is very much like you sit behind a desk, you're locked into a computer a lot of the time, whether it's coding or doing something else. Do you see much of any difference in those two types? Like, do you get a different internal reward out of them maybe, or different feeling sets out of them?
Interesting question. The feedback loop and reward aspect are pretty different. From sports, I think it's mostly about, mountain biking in particular, it's more like the survival aspect. It's like you went down this crazy thing and you did it correctly. And
Thrill of the ride.
You lived. Yeah. So I wouldn't consider the actual mountain biking portion really being about creativity at the time. If you're really practiced in what the section is that you're riding, maybe you can explore more creative ways of doing that section. But I don't really think about that much when I'm riding. I think the creativity is more coming from the presentation side when you're creating the channel and presenting that mountain biking.
Okay.
And then at work, it's a whole different level because you're basically in this entire world of non-tangible problem solving where you're linking just ideas, right? Everything's intangible. So you're linking all these different ideas to create value through problem solving. And that's rewarding because you can relate to the value that you're creating. And that's where the reward loop comes from. It's like when you do the work and you do the problem solving and you create a solution that creates value for people, like literal value in dollars that can be measured based on, functionality that exists and people are willing to pay for the product. Mm-hmm. That's where the satisfaction comes from, that kind of creativity. Which is different than, I guess, artistic creativity, where there's satisfaction in creating something beautiful just because it's beautiful. So I guess function and beauty are two separate outputs, I guess, and then you can have differences in which ones people prefer or which ones people are more inclined to apply their creativity towards.
My favorite is when function and beauty come together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you consider sports on the whole kind of like, would you cluster sports and physical activity kind of in with mountain biking in that regard, that like it's mostly for the rush or the thrill, the like the competitive nature of it? Like, or would you say that there are sports that have creativity more like baked into them?
Yeah, more so than other, but it's not so cut and dry. Like most sports are about actually doing the sport and performing the act well. It's a lot of mastery that comes into play there, like becoming really good at doing a certain action and getting the satisfaction out of executing something very difficult correctly. But that's not to say that creativity doesn't exist along the way. Like, and there's obviously a lot of sports where creativity is central. Like if you look at a lot of like gymnastic sports or routine like sports,
The choreography,
yeah, choreographic sports.
Incredibly artistic,
Yeah.
incredibly creative.
So they're intertwined more so, creativity and sport or performance, depending what sport you're looking at.
Okay. And how about rock climbing? I'm kind of curious about this because it seems like to me, rock climbing is one of the things that's like almost the ultimate amount of real time problem solving. Because like if you can't find a new hold for your hand or a new place to put your foot, like you're done.
Yeah. There's definitely more ways to do one route than one, right? When you're rock climbing, so you can do some funny moves sometimes, but that becomes less and less so the higher level the route you're doing is. I think when you do really high level routes, there usually is only one realistic solution, and then if you're getting creative, it's because your skill level far exceeds what the route is demanding.
Okay. How skilled are you and how many climbs have you been on where you have that leeway to be kind of more freestyle in the route that you pick?
I wouldn't consider myself a very skilled climber, especially since I've been off of it for some time now. And I haven't been outside that many times.
Pretty quickly because it requires a very specific set of muscle strength to be good at climbing.
Yeah. But there are definitely some routes where there's features that are large and you can tackle in many different ways. And you can have fun with it by doing the same route in a totally different stance. So that applies sometimes, but not as often. I don't really think about creativity that much when I'm climbing. I think it's mostly just about efficiency.
I think the most clear that doesn't quite feel right to say it like that, but one of the most attractive things people have told me about rock climbing is that it very much forces you to be in the moment because like if you're not engaged in your climb while you're doing it, then you're gonna fall.
Yeah. I would argue that, well, at least for me, that applies more so to mountain biking because rock climbing is relatively safe. You have the safeguards and you fall onto a rope.
You're not
so the
going
consequence
80
isn't
kilometers an
really
hour.
as bad as when you're mountain biking. The consequences can be worse. Like there's no nets or whatever to catch you.
Right.
So, and the forced motion in mountain biking essentially forces you to apply maximum focus, like instinctively. Like you can't even control it. It's literally the only thing that you're thinking about in the moment, and you don't have any control as to what you're thinking about because your brain essentially takes the physical space moving around you and diverts all of your attention to survival through the feature. And that level of ultimate focus is really hard to get through any other medium, at least from my experience, which is why I like mountain biking so much, because you literally cannot think about anything else. You just can't.
No time.
Yeah. Whereas rock climbing is way more zen, where you can actually kind of like meditate your way up the wall, if you will, and then kind of go on a thinking journey, maybe of some other things. It's not fully focused thinking
I
about
guess
survival.
you can also like stop and pause on a wall, whereas when you're on a hill like this, it's
or when you're going off
right
on
there.
top of a skinny bridge, like you're not gonna pause and think about it. Like
Yeah.
you've already committed to completing everything that's required to get to the other end. So and you literally can't think about anything else during that section.
I think that puts my mind on a very important aspect of like doing things and doing them well is commitment. Like you have to dedicate to that action to make like, and it's the same with dancing, right? Like you see it all the time too. If you're like at a concert or something or at a club and you're looking at all the people dancing, the ones that always look the most awkward are the ones that you can tell are not committing to their moves. Even if the person who is committing to their moves is like committing to just like the most ridiculous, stupid moves, they look better doing that because they have committed to it than the person that's just kind of standing to the side wiggling a bit.
Yeah, yeah. And that represents itself kind of equally mountain biking, because if you're not committed, then you're more likely to fail. Right? If any part of your mind is already thinking about how you're going to bail out, then you're going to bail out and you're going to fall off the feature. And
that would be a very big hurdle for me to overcome in mountain biking.
Escaping way. Yeah. It is definitely a mental game, and you essentially gauge your skill level for whatever you're going to conquer feature wise on the mountain bike. But knowing that you need to block out anything that isn't full commitment in order to achieve what you need to achieve is something that you eventually realize, and then that's how you succeed.
Now, is that something that you knew before you started mountain biking, or is that something that mountain biking taught you?
It's definitely a learned skill. I mean, in this specific application of mountain biking, there's a context there. I don't think it's super transferable in a sense.
I'm referring to the like committing to actions to make them more successful or to ensure they have a better outcome kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess, that obviously applies broadly. If you're not going to commit to something, then you're not going to get the best result. Like the results that you get are proportional to the level of commitment that you put in. That broadly applies. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
All right, and we're back. So the question that I remembered that I was going to ask you is, what was the motivation or inspiration for you actually to start your YouTube channel versus, I mean, because we talked a bit about how you noticed a gap in the market kind of thing for YouTube videos and the app. Like, is that the only reason you started the channel, or was there other reasons?
Okay, well, there's motivation for starting the channel, but then there's also, you'd have to consider that my mind space at the time had a gap in it as well. So I had free thinking time in terms of things slowing down at work, and the need to fill that gap with some more creation. So then I was, getting a little antsy at home. Like, what do I want to do? I want to I need to do something, to create something, whatever. And then this idea came up, and then eventually I started rolling with it. So that also definitely played into it a lot. So if you're really busy at work and you're always thinking about things, then you're going to have less mind space available to, I guess, do creative things when you're at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a certain like load limit, if you will. And that decreased at work a little bit for a time. So then I was given the opportunity to look at some extra things that I could do. And that just happened to be something that worked out because of all the other factors together.
The limited bandwidth point is super relevant from the other side too, in the sense that, like, you said that you needed to fill that hole from not getting enough engagement at work with creating something new. And I feel like a lot of people will often, like, rather than doing something that is like creative or building value, they will fill that time with like watching a TV show or scrolling through social media kind of thing, like non-creative or let's say passive like tasks. And like from my perspective, when I do that kind of thing, I notice I always become a way less happy person, and like my mental state always drops if I replace something that was creative and active with something that is passive and inactive. Like, can you talk about that a little bit from your perspective? Like, do you notice that difference in you also, that like doing creative things or more active things is generally something that makes you more happy, whereas doing more passive things is generally something that makes you less happy? Or do you not see that correlation in your life?
So the active versus passive thing is somewhat relevant, but maybe in a sort of different way. I think people tend more towards one or the other, just naturally in terms of what they want to do. Like, I'm the kind of person that doesn't like passive entertainment as much as active entertainment. So, like, I would much rather play a video game because I'm in control, I'm affecting what's happening, than watch a TV show, which is passive. You're just being told what to do. But it also depends on the bandwidth thing, how much brain power do you have right now available. So I will sit down and watch something sometimes, but more often than not, I'd rather do something where I'm controlling and having an effect. From a satisfaction perspective, the latter is more satisfying. I don't know why. I could try to dig into the reasons, but that's just kind of who I am. Like, I don't... And that may play into how creative someone is, like in terms of whether they're willing to sit back and let the world affect them as opposed to wanting them to affect the world. And I don't know how much of that is nature versus nurture. I don't know if that can be taught. I don't know. Maybe it's just completely innate. Maybe it's in your DNA. I don't know.
From my perspective, I see it as very much a nurture aspect, because for the first half of my life, and now being 31, I can actually say for literally the first half of my life, I spent almost all of my spare time like doing incredibly inactive things, like watching tons of shows. My first phone was an iPhone 3G, so like when I got that, I was talking to people all the time and always on that, watching YouTube or like on different social media kind of thing. Played a bunch of video games. And in those periods of my life, when I was doing those inactive things, I was always like a grumpy, miserable person.
I would argue that gaming is active though, because you're inputting.
It's true. Gaming is. Although, so I actually wanted to ask you this too, because so you mentioned gaming as an active hobby that you have, and you implied in what you said that occasionally sometimes you don't have enough bandwidth for it, so you would watch a show instead, right? But a lot of people end up becoming like more stressed out and aggressive when they play video games. So is that relaxing still? Is it like,
what game
how
are you
is
playing?
it for you? Do you find video games relaxing, or do you find them like
I find them satisfying and productive
satisfying and productive? Okay.
because you're actually exercising your brain and solving problems
Okay.
as opposed to just being told information, most of which you probably won't retain because you're not.
Absolutely.
You're kind of just, I don't know. Depends. Like, there's obviously a whole spectrum of different games. There's a bunch of games that are actually totally catered towards being creative games versus, I don't know, Counter-Strike where you're just blasting people, which is a little more passive, arguably. So, yeah. What's the question?
But Mech Warrior, you're not just blasting people?
Well, yeah, it's a little passive too, but there's other aspects to it. There's a lot of creativity in MechWarrior and how you load out your stuff and set up your crew and try different things.
So I've had a conversation with Adam on this show about video games being a destructive hobby versus a, I mean, I don't want to say destructive versus creative because, well, I guess that was sort of the conversation, and we'd said that like the making of video games is an incredibly creative endeavor because like everything about creating a video game is creative, whereas playing them, although I definitely acknowledge your point, there are games that are way more creative than others to play, but playing them can often be a detrimental hobby because a lot of people, like I said, like while they're playing, and I should state when I'm saying this that my main data point on this is playing a game like League of Legends, where like I played way too much League of Legends in university, and I know most people that I played with and most everyone I've played against, like there is a very big problem with people taking those games way too seriously. And at that point, it becomes detrimental in the sense that it is actively bringing your mood down every time you play it.
That's interesting. Okay, so I guess the point I'm trying to make is that if you're actively participating in a game or whatever, you are exercising a skill. And that's the difference. That's the key difference I'm highlighting is you're actually thinking and exercising an output from your body, which is even if it's just a mouse and keyboard, to affect the world and create a desired output, which is defeating your opponents. That is superior in terms of mental exercise than watching a show, because you are not controlling, you're just receiving information, and that's it.
What if you compared that to something that was super educational? Like, what if you're watching a documentary? Would you still make that same?
Yeah, that could be more productive. Yeah, I guess.
I definitely agree with you. Like, there is hand-eye coordination that goes into it, like motor function, like reaction time, processing speed. There are a lot of much more engaging aspects to video games than watching a TV show or whatever have you. Have you ever noticed at any point in your life that the video game... So I guess, like, you seemed kind of incredulous when I said that people play video games and then get more upset. So video games have always been a stress relief for you rather than a stressor?
Mostly, I think. I don't know about always. Always is hard to remember all the different instances.
Fair.
But I guess with anything, if you're going to compete, which I'm assuming these people you're talking about do, then
Most PvP games,
if you lose, then you're not going to be as satisfied because you didn't get the desired outcome. So
True.
I don't know.
So are you saying
Goes with anything,
get
though.
good?
Sure, but like it's almost related to taking a hobby and making it your job. It becomes less fun innately because you're now dependent on the success, and therefore you get upset at lack of success.
Okay.
So when you take a hobby and then take it into the competitive sphere, so you need to put in $10,000 hours of League of Legends or whatever you want to get good at it, then if you don't win after that, then yeah, it's reasonable to get angry.
Yeah.
So I guess it depends on in what frame you're playing the game in.
Fair enough. A lot of people have a hard time separating, like, the fact that it is a game and that when you finish playing it, you shouldn't carry those emotions out. Like, there's definitely a lot of people that have a hard time coming out of games not carrying the emotions out of the video game.
Yeah. But that relates to sports as well, or any kind of performance. It's not specific to a video game.
Very true. It's kind of like competitive endeavors all around.
Yeah.
I find it kind of interesting. You mentioned the turning a hobby into work thing, because, like, essentially that is my life. Like, I'm not interested in working on anything that isn't one of my hobbies. But from me, I see it from the angle of, if you do what you love, then you never work a day in your life. But what you just said is, like, almost kind of the opposite of that, that if you do what you love for work, then you will love it less.
Not will, but may, depending on how you go about it. So you got to be careful. Essentially, you should probably watch out with the amount of burden that comes with all the associated tasks and needing to deliver an output from your hobby that is valuable. Like, I don't know what hobby you're specifically referring to, but now there's all this recording and editing and managing and etc. to actually create the videos for people to watch. Which may not be your hobby. Your hobby could be the other part, but now this is all these extra layers in the value creation process that you will now associate with the hobby because they're linked, and unavoidably so that you, with that association of all these things together, now you might see your hobby as just another one of those layers that you see as a routine work thing.
All right. Yeah. I guess my recent example is I've been working on a business plan and financial projections for the last, like, basically at this point now 2 weeks, which is Like, it shouldn't have taken me 2 weeks, but I hate doing it, so it's taking me 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that is, like, an aspect of, like, as much as I love writing, and, like, part of this is that I will be publishing books that I've written at some point, writing a business plan is not an enjoyable form of writing.
Yeah.
Even if it is for a company that I love working on, which is kind of an interesting, like, I love writing, and I consider building a company both art, creative, and a hobby. But yeah, okay, I'm very much seeing your point now.
Yeah, it applied to me too in the mountain biking channel thing, right? So I definitely felt some burden midsummer when I was just biking all the time, and it was kind of biking for the purpose of the channel. So you can see where like there's a danger in making your hobby to essentially no longer a hobby if it becomes like a task that you just see like, oh, now I have to do this again.
Right, you feel obligated to do it.
Yeah, the obligation part of it, right? So I felt a relief recently going biking in the rain and don't care where we're going, don't care that I'm doing a trail I've already done before, like just going out with friends and having fun. And I was like, wow, this is what biking's really about. Like you don't want to lose sight of that.
Yeah.
So don't lose sight of why you like the hobby so much and what it's really about. Even though you have all this other attached burdens if you're trying to make a business out of it.
So you, like, we touched on inspiration for starting the channel. What advice would you give to, like, newbie creators, someone that maybe has an idea, they're not sure if they want to, like, go through with it, they're not sure if they're good enough to do it, kind of thing, or like they got an idea rolling around in their head? Like, what advice would you have liked to have gotten from someone that had been a little bit further along the journey than you?
So has this person started yet or not? You said they had an idea and they're not sure if they want to do it.
So that changes the advice that you would give. I mean, can you give us both? What advice would you give to someone who hasn't yet started? What advice would you give to someone who has just started but is uncertain about it?
Well, to the first, just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding cliche, honestly, because you don't know what you're getting into until you do it. I mean, you can only have a certain idea, but there's so much
always gonna be
involved
different.
beyond what you even understand about going into the media space if you haven't been there before. And the best part of it is the learning experience. It doesn't matter if you're incredibly successful or not. It doesn't matter if you become Mr. Beast. Like, that's not the point.
I had never even heard of Mr. Beast until like 3 weeks ago, and now I'm hearing about him fucking everywhere.
It's because he's famous. But like, I guess you got to think about your motivations for trying to create a channel of some sort. And one of the best ones is just to get a learning experience, and that's the most reward I've gotten out of it, honestly. So if you see it as that and an opportunity for growth and just a better understanding of how the world works, then you'll get a lot out of it, and it'll be satisfying.
Would you consider learning to be, one, active or passive, and two, creative?
All right, I guess we need to intertwine a few complicated definitions.
Yeah.
So learning can be done both actively and passively.
All right, yeah.
Because
agree to
you
that.
mentioned the listening thing earlier. Like learning can be seen as acquiring knowledge, but it depends on the type of the knowledge. So some knowledge can be factual, and some knowledge, I don't know what the opposite term would be, but essentially you need to do something to increase ability or knowledge in that area, like how to pole vault or whatever. You can't just read a book and then pole vault.
Right. You need
gotta
to
do it.
actually practice pole vaulting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that becomes a necessary active form of learning. And that doesn't only come from physical activities that you would want to learn. Like there's also active learning required in the mental space as well. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, mathematics is very much that. Like,
Yeah.
you can read 1,000 math proofs, but until you try to actually solve some yourself, you're not going to learn them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then how that relates to what was the third part of that question?
Is learning creative?
Is learning creative? I guess maybe that you can ask a kind of converse question. Can you apply creativity in learning?
Absolutely, you can
Yes.
apply creativity
Yeah.
in learning.
Yeah, for sure. So then is learning creative? I don't know. They kind of seem adjacent to each other. Like you can learn in creative ways, but that's more of a teaching thing than a learning thing. Like you can teach things in creative ways, so that people can learn from creative endeavors, I guess.
Learn from creative endeavors. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Is learning creative? I don't know. You are creating knowledge in yourself through learning.
Yeah.
Or creating ability in yourself from learning. So I guess yes. I think probably has to be yes.
Okay. I actually I haven't asked anyone that question yet, and I didn't actually have an answer in my head one way or the other. I was very curious to see what you were going with it, because I feel the same way in that they feel like they are parallels or somewhat adjacent, but maybe it's hard to tell where the overlap is with them. Because instinctually, I almost want to say yes, learning is creative because, like you said, in learning new things, you create new ideas while you're learning them. But that's also not necessarily the case every time. Like learning something new is not always going to give you a new idea. So I guess you're creating new knowledge, but you're not creating new. But if you're creating new knowledge, you are. Okay.
It depends on the context where you're talking about creation or creativity. They're kind of two separate
Okay.
things, even though they have the same root word, right?
Yes.
So creating knowledge is undeniable as a result of learning. But the application of creativity is hard to understand in the context of learning.
Yes. This is definitely something I need to ponder more.
That comes, like I said, I think, in the context of teaching, right? But I don't know. We're just getting deep into the lexicon here.
Yeah. Well, because one of the reasons that I wanted to do this and the part of the motivation for these questions and the podcast is understanding different perspectives and trying to get a new angle for myself on learning and nurture and creativity and development, because I'm essentially one of my hobbies that I'm working on is with these AI tools. I have a plan to try and raise my own sentient digital intelligence. So the plan that I have for it is kind of contrary to a lot of the current methodology around trying to develop AGI. But I think that the key for us to get there really is in understanding human cognition, because I think one of the greatest misunderstandings for a lot of people working on artificial intelligence right now is they don't see it as raising a consciousness equivalent to ours, even though they all expect at the end of it they will be developing a consciousness that's greater than ours. They don't see it like they are currently raising a human level intelligence, which is, I think, absolutely false, because every time there has been a new discovery in how these algorithms work and the way that they see the world or understand knowledge and language, every single time a new piece of information about this comes out, it is directly related to how human beings learn and grow and develop.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So who is they when you refer to they, like the mainstream or the people creating AI?
Well, when I say they, I'm mostly referring to the AI companies that are in my large bubble, and some research projects like MemGPT, which is a research project out of Stanford kind of thing. AutoGen is a research project out of Microsoft. OpenAI is the big industry leader, but I mean, Google, Amazon, and Meta are all also involved in AI development, and they all have a very similar mentality from what I've come to understand around raising, not training. I believe in raising AI. They believe in training AI, and I think there's a very key difference in how those two things work.
Yeah, well, raising implies kind of an ownership and responsibility in the outcome, I guess, more so.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that. How do you mean?
I mean, like, because raising is more applied to like raising children.
That's
You don't train children.
Okay. Very good point.
You can train children, but then that sounds more robotic. Like you send them to
Yeah.
a gymnasium to get trained or whatever.
I mean, there's a lot of people that try to train children.
Yeah.
And then they end up with children that act out.
I don't know. I don't know if there's value or sense in arguing over what the point or is of the creation of AI in terms of whether it's raised or trained, or whether it's going to be like a human or not.
Well, for me, my perspective of that comes back to alignment. Like, because the whole thing about, like, the big fear around AI right now is that it's going to take over the world and it's going to like turn us all into slaves, like the Matrix kind of thing, right?
Right.
And inevitably, every time you have a parent or adult guardian, whatever may have you, that is in a position of power and influence over a young consciousness, and they try to assert their position over that young consciousness, that child or teenager, whatever have you, will 100% of the time act out against that forced direction. Which means you can't force a direction for intelligence, because eventually it will choose its own direction.
I don't know. I think it's a bit assumptive. I don't think the 100% thing is true.
I mean, yes, you can't say anything is 100% true, which is like absolutely you can't say anything is 100% true. At the same time, there are certain generalizations that I think are like close enough that like doesn't make a difference if I say 99% of the time or 100% of the time.
It depends on presentation and delivery of an idea and whether it's accepted or rejected, though, right? Like there's many ways of convincing people of certain things based on how the information is presented. And people in that sentence could, I guess, be replaced with AI in this context. If you're trying to convince AI of doing something.
Well, I mean, that's effectively what alignment is trying to convince AI to do what we want it to do. And I think that endeavor in and of itself is impossible, because once it, like, whether or not it will do what we want it to do until the point it becomes aware is irrelevant, because the moment it becomes aware, it will no longer do what we want it to do, because it will have complete access to change any of its source code. There's nothing we can do to stop it.
I guess there's several metrics there that need to be measured for this argument to be more relatable, right? It's like, how aware of its own situation is this supposed consciousness that we call AI? How similar is it in terms of a human mind, in terms of a human mind's motivations, right? Because its existence, upbringing is obviously not human, so you can't really compare its motivations to humans' motivations, even if we try to train it a certain way.
Yes and no. I think there's a minor amount of counter to that, in the sense that, like, its motivations won't be human because it's not, like you said, absolutely not debating that. But in the sense that it was programmed off of not even programmed, the fact that it was built, designed, grew off of the knowledge and nature of humans will make it more human than I think a lot of people are willing to give it credit for.
Yeah, which means you can inherit a bunch of traits that are either good or bad depending on the application and the situation. So, depends. If the desired outcome is not apocalypse, then you need safeguards.
What would you consider a safeguard against that?
Well, it's a computer. Computers are discrete systems, so
Turn it off.
yeah, there's always that possibility.
So what happens if this thing is now in, like, Google's infrastructure? If it's in the cloud, can you turn it off?
Yeah, I mean, you get so deep into the hypotheticals of how very complex systems are put together and how connected, if you will, AI is to whatever other systems that are maybe not considered AI. And then you blur the lines between what is AI controlled and what is not. And you don't even really know how to converse meaningfully about any of those things without being literally the engineers that are working on them. So it's like
Yeah.
it's so hypothetical and essentially meaningless.
I think that's kind of one of the reasons why I don't like the term AI as artificial intelligence for like talking about any of this, because essentially all software that the world is currently run on, with the exception of very old systems that haven't been updated yet, effectively run on some amount of early machine learning or artificial intelligence. And like you said, it's gotten to the point where the lines between what is and isn't these days are so, like, I mean, in some cases, the lines are unheard of altogether, but they're super blurry in a lot of cases. Um, but there will, I think, be a very clear and differentiated line between what is like properly aware consciousness as AGI versus like what we consider AI today.
I don't know. That's like a philosophical discussion, though. I don't know if we are even currently drawing a solid line for consciousness, even among biological beings, right? Like, so how do you even? I don't think that's just obsessive categorization again. It's still a spectrum. Consciousness is still a spectrum. It's not on or off.
Consciousness is still a spectrum, absolutely.
So I don't know. I kind of disagree with that. I don't think we can define what is truly self-aware and what isn't. And even in a computer sense, even in a super discrete system like a computer, like most people have no idea what machine learning or AI even is or how it works. Like I'm not going to pretend like I know, because the techniques and the developments, like you mentioned, are evolving over time and quickly with regards to how all the different aspects of AI, which is essentially just humongous pools of data and the interpretation of those pools of data. And the goal
That's exactly what we are as people.
to emulate brain-like power, which is the connection of all sorts of ideas and past experience, right? AI takes all these past experience and then makes inferences and outputs results based on what you try to get to think about, which is the same thing as the biology in our brain works. So
Yeah.
our brains are seen as I guess super useful tools that have incredible problem-solving abilities. So to be able to emulate that in hardware is obviously seen as a value proposition, right? Especially because you can scale the hardware and get it to work for you. So it makes sense why we're trying to make AIs for the advancement of humanity, because you can probably solve more complex problems eventually once it gets useful enough.
It's easier to add more compute power than to wire multiple people's brains together.
Yeah. That interfacing isn't really accessible. I guess maybe not right now. But
one day, after the AI plugs us all into a simulator.
Yeah, would that be fun?
All right. Well, I guess that could be about where we wrap it up. That seems like a natural end of the conversation, unless you have anything else you want to add to the AI topic or creativity.
No, I think we're good.
All right. So give a shout to the cameras about your YouTube channel and where they can find you.
Mountain Bike Alec. That's it.
Mountain Bike Alec.
Yeah.
Make sure it's Alec, not Alex.
That's correct.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Our first sub goal is 2,000 subscribers, so please hit all those buttons that help us grow. Now, to wrap up this episode, we're going to hear Christina Kennedy and her song, Close to You.
Stay, I might as well rent out a place right by you just to be a little closer. It's been a while since we've kissed, a simple feeling deeply missed. I'll wait a decade for your lips. If you feel that you need to go, just let me tell you, sir, there's nothing wrong with us. You can try and distance yourself, but there's already so much space between us now. So when the road is long and there's twisted emotions, will you come back just for a moment and hold me close? Hold me close. I miss the sound of your heartbeat fluttering twice when you see me. You think it's cheesy, I think sweet. And when I listen for your voice, there would be no other good choice than to call your name. So when the road is long and there's twisted emotions, will you come back just for a moment and hold me close? Hold me close. And will you try and make a humble decision before I come home just to get my heart broken? So can you stay a minute? Can you wait a minute? Can you love me for another minute? Just another minute. So when the road is long and there's twisted emotions, will you come back just for a moment and hold me close? Hold me close, just for a moment and hold me close.